produce the material universe. They combined with the help of the energy of the Supreme Lord and were able to produce a shining egg. And there's no uh, there's no purport, so we'll go on to text 15. For over 1,000 years, the shiny egg lay on the waters of the causal ocean in the lifeless state. Then the Lord entered it as Garbhodakshaya Vishnu. Purport by Srila Prabhupada. From this verse, it appears that all the universes are floating in the causal ocean. Text 16. From the navel of the personality of Godhead, Garbhodakshaya Vishnu, sprouted a lotus flower, effulgent like 1,000 blazing suns. This lotus flower is the reservoir of all conditioned souls, and the first living entity who came out of the lotus flower was the omnipotent Brahma. Purport by His Divine Grace, A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Prabhupada. It appears from this verse that the conditioned souls who rested within the body of the personality Godhead after the dissolution of the last creation came out in the sum total form of the lotus. This is called Hiranyagarbha. The first living entity to come out was Lord Brahma, who is independently able to create the rest of the manifested universe, the manifested universe. The lotus is described here as effulgent as the glare of 1,000 suns. This indicates that the living entities, as parts and parcels of the Supreme Lord, are also of the same quality, since the Lord also diffuses his bodily glare known as Brahmajyoti. The description of Vaikuntha, as stated in Bhagavad Gita and other Vedic literatures, is confirmed herewith. In Vaikuntha, the spiritual sky, there's no need of sunshine, moonshine, electricity, or fire. Every planet there is self-effulgent like the sun, people. Text 17. When that Supreme Personality Godhead who was lying on the Garbhodak ocean entered the heart of Brahma, Brahma brought his intelligence to bear, and with the intelligence invoked, he began to create the universe as it was before. Purport by Srila Prabhupada. At a certain time, the personality of Godhead, Karanadakshaya Vishnu, lies in the Karana ocean and produces many thousands of universes from his breathing. Then he enters again into each and every universe as Garbhodakshaya Vishnu and fills up half of each universe with his own respiration. The other half of the universe remains vacant, and that vacant region is called outer space. Then the lotus flower sprouts from his abdomen and produces the first creature, Brahma. Then again, as Kshirodakshaya Vishnu, the Lord enters into the heart of every living entity, including Brahma. This is confirmed in Bhagavad Gita 15 chapter. The Lord says, I am seated in everyone's heart, and by me are remembrance and forgetfulness made possible. As the witness of the activities of the individual entities, the Lord gives each one remembrance and intelligence to act according to his desire at the time he was annihilated in his last birth. Who was annihilated? The living entity. Mm-hmm. In the last millennium. This intelligence is invoked according to one's own capacity or by the law of karma. Brahma was the first living entity, and he was empowered by the Supreme Lord to act in charge of the mode of passion. Therefore, he was given the required intelligence, which is so powerful and extensive that he is almost independent of the control of the Supreme Personality of Godhead, just as a highly posted manager is almost as independent as the owner of a firm. Brahma is described here as independent because, as Lord's representative to control the universe, he is almost as powerful and independent as the Supreme Personality of Godhead. The Lord, as the Supreme Supersoul within Brahma, gave him the intelligence to create. The creative power, therefore, of every living entity is not his own. It is by the grace of the Lord that one can create. There are many scientists and great workers in this material world who have wonderful creative force, but they act and create only according to the direction of the Supreme Lord. A scientist may create many wonderful inventions by the direction of the Lord, but it is not possible for him to overcome the stringent laws of material nature by his intelligence. Nor is it possible to acquire such intelligence from the Lord, for the Lord's supremacy would then be hampered. It is stated in this verse that Brahma created the universe as it was before. This means that he created everything by the same name and form as in the previous cosmic manifestation. Srila Prabhupada Ki Jai. Well, it says Brahma is described here as independent because, as the Lord's representative to control the universe, he is almost as powerful and independent as the Supreme Personality of Godhead. Of course, the most significant word in that sentence is almost. The Lord, as the super soul within Brahma, gave him the intelligence to create. So everything is coming from Krishna. The creative power, therefore, of every living entity is not his own. It is by the grace of the Lord that one can create. Now, that's a very important statement. And when we see, like Einstein, when he died, they cut out his brain and studied it. But what did they understand from that brain? Zero, nothing, because uh, the let's say genius, so-called Einstein, that was all by Krishna's mercy.
Mm.
It wasn't a material thing, right?
Yes.
So by studying the brain, that they don't really learn that much.
Definitely not gross material.
Yeah,
And then the subtle mind has left already. The mind, intelligence.
exactly. Yeah, yeah. Just like Socrates, when he was given poison, so he willingly took the poison, and he said that you cannot. Basically, he said you cannot catch me.
Mm.
In other words, uh, just because they're going to kill him, it doesn't mean that they control him, because he has an eternal soul. He believed in the soul. Socrates looked that up. He believed in the soul, the existence of the soul, just did, and so did Plato. But when we get to after Plato, the disciple of Plato was Aristotle. He started deviating from Socrates and Plato. But Socrates and Plato both believed that there's a soul, although their understanding of the soul was not perfect. But at least they believe there's a soul and it's eternal. But Aristotle, he began the whole, let's say, movement toward atheism, and he did not agree with everything that Aristotle and well, what his gurus said. So you have Aristotle and you have uh, I forget what's the name. Anyway, so you have the, uh, in the Greeks you have Plato and you have Aristotle
This is like Socrates,
and
Plato.
Socrates. Yeah, so Socrates and Plato were both more or less on the same, uh, let's say, vibe together. They believed in the existence of a soul, or they didn't really understand completely what the soul is, but they believed in that and the immortality of the soul.
Yes, the Socrates, as depicted in the writings of his student Plato, indeed believed in the concept of the soul.
Yeah.
He argued for the immortality of the soul and its separation from the body upon death.
Yeah.
Socrates believed that the soul was the essence of a person and it would continue to exist beyond the physical body.
Right.
And then he was given the death sentence in 399 BC, which required him to drink a cup of poison.
And he wasn't afraid to do that.
Yeah, he chose to comply with the sentence rather than escape or something.
He could have escaped.
Yeah.
He could have run away, but he was not afraid at all because he knew that the soul's eternal. But from Aristotle on, it changed the understanding of Plato and Socrates changed, and it became materialistic rather than spiritual. Although uh, Aristotle and Plato were Mayavadis, but still they believed in the soul. But they didn't have full knowledge. But then uh, after that, the Greeks went off the rails, and
Clearly says that
yeah,
Aristotle, the student of Plato, diverged from his teacher's theory of forms and developed a more empirical and systematic approach to philosophy.
yes. Okay, so then in this purport 17, Canto 3, chapter 20, verse 17, there's some very important statements. So it says, as the witness of the activities of the individual entities, the Lord gives each one remembrance and intelligence to act according to his desire at the time he was annihilated in his last birth, in the last millennium. This intelligence is invoked according to one's own capacity or by the law of karma. Let me read that again.
Yeah, the last sentence I had a question.
The Lord says, I am seated in everyone's heart, and by me are remembrance and forgetfulness made possible. As the witness of the activities of the individual entities, the Lord gives each one remembrance and intelligence to act according to his desire at the time he was annihilated in his last birth, in the last millennium. This intelligence is invoked according to one's own capacity or by the law of karma. Okay, what is your question?
The intelligence is invoked according to one's own capacity or by the law of karma. Is that are
Yeah,
they
well, the law of
either
karma.
or is it the same? Basically, law of karma is defining the capacity of a person.
Yeah, everyone is developing their own, let's say, karma, and it's in other words, according to one's own capacity and karma. So every one of us is acting in certain ways, and based on that, we have knowledge, remembrance, and forgetfulness, and it's all controlled by the Lord. So man proposes, God disposes. So whatever we are desiring, and based on our behavior or karma, we or Krishna gives us knowledge and and forgetfulness. So when you have a person like when you have a demon, uh, then the demon is limited by Krishna according to his karma, and everybody is limited by uh, their karma. They produce the karma, and Krishna makes sure that they remain within the parameters of the karma that they've produced. They can't go outside of it unless they surrender completely to the Lord. Then they can go beyond uh, what their karma should be, because Krishna either puts a halt on their previous karma, or by regulated devotional service, little by little, the karma is eradicated and doesn't exist anymore. Okay, so it says here, the Lord, as the super soul within Brahma, gave him the intelligence to create. The creative power, therefore, of every living entity is not his own. It is by the grace of the Lord that one can create. So, as we said, after Einstein died, they uh, pulled out his brain uh, from his head, and they studied it. And what do you think they learned? Zero, because the intelligence that he had was not coming from a material body. It was uh, given by Krishna. So just by studying the brain, you don't really understand anything. Why don't you look that up? After Einstein died, they cut out his brain. What did they learn from that? That's a good example, because they want to understand why he had so-called so much intelligence. He wasn't really that intelligent, but anyway, let's assume that he had some intelligence. So, uh, what did they learn by cutting out his brain and studying it under a microscope and so forth?
No, scientists did not learn directly from the dead brain of Einstein in any significant scientific sense.
There you go. They didn't learn anything by cutting his brain out and studying it. You see, because it's not the material brain that is the source of knowledge. It's Krishna, and it's not a material thing. It's a spiritual thing. And I don't know what is spiritual. Well, knowledge, remembrance, and forgetfulness. It's all given by Krishna. So they're not going to learn anything by cutting the brain out and then studying it, putting it in a microscope or whatever. Yes.
Hare Krishna Maharaj. My daughter is doing an internship right now at a research center. They're studying Alzheimer's,
Yeah.
and there they cut the human brain,
Yeah.
and you can study the disease cells. So that is material. That's why you're able to cut the human brain and study that. But you don't see any of the knowledge or anything when you cut.
What? Oh, well, they're looking for disease.
Yeah, this Alzheimer's, like how the
But
different.
what did they find?
They're finding like how the different cells, I think there is certain intersections or like
Yeah,
coloring of the brain. That is what physical
physical things.
dimensions. Yeah,
Yeah.
that is what they're studying.
So now, have they found a way of stopping Alzheimer's?
I think that is the goal of that research lab. I don't think they found. I don't know enough about that, but my question is, so these things are disease is a material thing that you are able to study by cutting the brain. By the spiritual things such as knowledge and remembrance that you cannot study by cutting it. Is that the right way to understand? Or
Well, yes and no. The well, you can see if some part of the brain is damaged, right? Like maybe someone hit them on the head, and it damaged something, and what are you going to damage? You're going to damage the circulation of blood, right, coming to the brain. But sometimes people, somebody shoots an arrow, it goes right through the head of a person. Look that up, by the way. But they don't die. You see it. The arrow is both sides of the head, right? But they don't die. So it's very strange. You can see a picture of a person with arrows through their head. And it's not made up. It's factual. And then to let's say take that arrow out is a really delicate process because any little mistake you make, you kill the person. Did you have a picture of a man with an arrow through his head?
So there was in the 19th century railroad construction, an iron rod went through his skull.
Through what?
Through the skull.
Skull of somebody, yeah.
Damaging the frontal lobes.
Okay.
But he survived the injury and lived for another 12 years.
Okay. Is there a picture of it? It's a really nice picture. You see this guy with this metal thing right through his head, So there's something called the brain and there's something called the mind. Now, is there a difference between the mind and the brain? Well, yeah, I mean the brain is something material and the mind is something subtle. Can they? And that's why if you cut out, or they cut out the brain of Einstein, right? But they didn't understand anything. That,
is that Maharaj? They cut Einstein's brain.
oh yeah, and you just read that, right? They didn't really find anything. So actually, it's not the physical brain. It's it's Krishna's mercy, let's say, that gives a person knowledge, remembrance, and forgetfulness. Knowledge, remembrance, and forgetfulness. And someone like Einstein, he did a lot of things when, let's say, uh, between 1905 and 1920. And after that, he didn't do anything. And there's just that period where he, made some discoveries or some things. But after that, he was just a bad, uh, bask in his glory. But he never did anything significant after that. So what does it say?
Yeah, I'm trying to find the exact image, but there are images with people acting as if like there's an arrow.
Are they real or they're just?
No, they just put stick.
Oh, okay.
But there is one boy, I think it didn't go all the way through, but it went through one part of the skull. He still survived. There is one.
He still survived.
Brain of Albert Einstein. There is one Wikipedia article.
There's one thing.
A huge article on the brain of
What does it say?
Brain of Albert Einstein has been a subject of much research and speculation. Albert
Oh, well,
Einstein,
of course, speculation. They can't do anything without speculation.
Albert Einstein's brain was removed within 7.5 hours of his death. His apparent regularities or irregularities in the brain have been used to support various ideas about correlations in neuroanatomy with general or mathematical intelligence. Studies have suggested an increased number of glial cells in Einstein's brain.
Yeah, but when I asked ChatGPT, what it said is, even though there is some people have proposed this theory, that theory, there's also contradictory things. So they couldn't confirmedly say, okay, we learned something significant. So it summarized as if like there is no significant learning from this.
Yeah, I mean, they didn't see like some extraterrestrial miniature person in his brain or anything. It was just the same old, blood and you know, uh, and basically blood, and veins. Right? It looked like anybody else's brain. Yeah, so actually the intelligence is coming from Krishna. It's not coming from something material. What do they see when they open their brain? They just see veins and blood, things like that. They don't see more than that.
Preserving the brains of geniuses was not a new phenomenon. So a lot of genius brains have been preserved to study to figure out if there is any patterns.
Yeah. And is there anything?
Very highly developed convolutions, which was suggested as the explanation of his genius.
Very highly what?
Convolutions.
Convolutions. What does that mean? The folding or something like that?
They didn't say they found, right? Yeah, they expected that. Yeah. His brain was studied by German mathematician Carl Friedrich Gauss almost 100 years earlier. His brain was preserved. His brain was studied by Rudolf Wagner, who found its weight to be 1492 grams and the cerebral area equal to 219,588 square millimeters. Also found were highly developed convolutions, which was suggested as the explanation of his genius. Other brains that were removed and studied include those of Vladimir Lenin, the mathematician Sofia Kovalevskaya, and the Native American Ishi. The brain of Edward H. Rudolph, a noted philologist and criminal, was removed after his death in 1871. In 1972, it was still second largest brain on record.
Yeah, all they can see is the weight of the brain, the size of the brain.
Convolutions.
Okay, convolutions, yeah. But that doesn't really give them a lot of knowledge. I mean, can they produce a brain? No, they can't produce a brain, from scratch. And I mean, Einstein, he wasn't that intelligent. I mean, he like I said, it was only from 19, 1905 to 1920 that he did a lot of his so-called work. And by the way, he never experimented. He only uh, like Maxwell. He wasn't, he did a lot of experimentation. So he took a lot of the things that Maxwell, looked into and discovered, and gave a different interpretation of it. And basically, that's exactly what Prabhupada said. He said, you don't have to do any seminal research. You just have to, the research has already been done. You have to uh, simply interpret it properly. So, does it say that Einstein was doing experimentation to come up with all the things that he came up with?
He was primarily known for his theoretical work rather than experimental research.
Yeah, he didn't do any experimental research. Yeah. But he did, let's say he had the benefit of the research that happened before him, especially people like Maxwell and others. But he didn't do any research himself. And this is exactly what Prabhupada said. Prabhupada said, all the research has already been done. You just have to know how to interpret it. So, and that's why he said you don't have to do any research.
Maharaj, when Prabhupada says research is already done, done as in done by whom, Maharaj?
Previous people like Maxwell did a lot of research. Einstein didn't do any research.
Oh, about Einstein.
Well, not only Einstein, it's just in general. He said the research has already been done. You just have to know how to interpret it, correctly. So, all right. And seminal research is difficult to do. It's not an easy thing to do. You have to make all these experiments and measurements and so forth, and sometimes it takes years to do that. But once it's done, then you have to look at the data that you have and interpret it correctly. And so sometimes they have the data, but they don't really understand where it's leading to.
I mean, whatever physically they could identify, they have, I think, technically identified by now. But the problem is they are missing the key element, which is the soul and Paramatma. So as a result, it will bewilder them because they'll come up with something, but they will not understand what is causing. And that's why even in quantum theory, so they don't understand this concept that depending on the observer,
Yeah,
the particle
the
becomes like a
observer
particle.
can change the what you're seeing.
Yeah, wave versus particle. So those they don't understand why the observer has an influence.
Yes. Okay, so it says here in the purport, the Lord, as a super soul within Brahma, gave him the intelligence to create. The creative power, therefore, of every living entity is not his own. It is by the grace of the Lord that one can create. There are many scientists and great workers in this material world who have wonderful creative force, but they act and create only according to the direction of the Supreme Lord. Yeah, so sometimes many times scientists, they write a little history of how they came about, and they're finding, making theories or solving problems. Usually they say, well, I was thinking about this problem for a long time, and then I went to sleep and I had a dream, and I woke up and I had the answer. Look that up.
Yeah, I think the person who came up with the structure to represent benzene ring,
Yeah,
so that was a commonly quoted thing. You see,
yeah.
you probably know that.
You know about benzene? It means the chemical structure. Yeah, so sometimes somebody wakes up and said, "That's it. I saw it in my dream." Then that now I have the answer. Well, obviously, as it says here,
He experienced similar things, Maharaj.
what?
He experienced similar things
Yeah,
when we try to solve some mathematical problems.
yeah,
Couple of days we don't know what's happening.
yeah,
Suddenly one day there's slow step by step automatically comes through brain. I experienced.
yeah. So here it says, just as a highly posted manager is almost as independent as the owner of a firm, Brahma is described here as independent because, as the Lord's representative to control the universe, he is almost as powerful and independent as the Supreme Personality of Godhead. The Lord, as a supersoul within Brahma, gave him the intelligence to create. There it is. Gave him the intelligence to create. The creative power, therefore, of every living entity is not his own. It is by the grace of the Lord that one can create. There are many scientists and great workers in this material world who have wonderful creative force, but they act and create only according to the direction of the Supreme Lord. A scientist may create many wonderful inventions by the direction of the Lord, but it is not possible for him, meaning the scientist, to overcome the stringent laws of material nature by his intelligence. Yeah, I mean, Einstein died. All these people die. Everybody dies. So there's something greater than them. The scientist may create many wonderful inventions by the direction of the Lord, but it is not possible for him to overcome the stringent laws of material nature by his intelligence, nor is it possible to acquire such intelligence from the Lord, for the Lord's supremacy would then be hampered. Boy, that's a very big statement. Sometimes people think, oh, and now we've
Eliminated God.
we're imitating God. So it says, a scientist may create many wonderful inventions by the direction of the Lord, but it is not possible for him to overcome the stringent laws of material nature by his intelligence. Nor is it possible to acquire such intelligence from the Lord, for the Lord's supremacy would then be hampered. So Einstein was not able to find the unified field theory. Look that up, the unified field theory. He tried, but with all his intelligence, and up until today, also, no one has been able to find the unified field theory. So what is the unified field theory? It explains what is the cause of all movements and all events that happen in the material world. It's called unified field theory.
Yeah, so Albert Einstein did not complete his quest for a unified field theory. The unified field theory was Einstein's attempt to formulate a single theoretical framework that would unite all fundamental forces of the nature.
Yep.
Particularly electromagnetism and gravity, with a single set of equations.
Yeah. So he came up with E equals mc squared, but that doesn't explain everything in nature. That explains how to make an atomic bomb, which is what it was used for. But that's not explaining all the phenomena that we see in nature. So they're still looking for the unified field theory. But that unified field theory is Krishna himself. Okay. Anything else?
So in a way, this is not possible for the humans because then we are putting the Lord in a box. I mean, we're defining, there's no way you can come up with an equation because Krishna is Swarat. So whatever we think he is, he can be much more than what we think he is.
Well, the unified field theory would explain everything that's happening in the universe.
Yeah.
You'd have one equation that explains everything that's happening in the universe. They're not able to do that.
But technically that's not possible, right? Because Krishna himself says that we will only understand Krishna somewhat, but we cannot understand him in full, right?
Well, there's a proportion there to the proportion that you surrender to the Lord gives you knowledge. So was Einstein surrendered to the Lord? No. He was to a little bit, but not much. So you're never going to find that equation that explains all movements and all actions and everything in the universe. No, because you would have to be completely surrendered to the Lord to be able to understand that. And none of these people are completely surrendered to the Lord. Einstein sometimes would talk about God, but his understanding of God was not the standard understanding of God. It was his own understanding. In fact, I'd have to look up in my papers. I really studied Einstein at one time. I came up to the conclusion that he was not actually that smart. See, I don't remember too much right now what I was. I'll remember it. Okay, so it says here the creative power, therefore, of every living entity is not his own. It is by the grace of the Lord that one can create. There are many scientists and great workers in this material world who have wonderful creative force, but they act and create only according to the direction of the Supreme Lord. A scientist may create many wonderful inventions by the direction of the Lord, but it is not possible for him to overcome the stringent laws of material nature by his intelligence, nor is it possible to acquire such intelligence from the Lord, for the Lord's supremacy would then be hampered. See, now that's a very important point, because what are people trying to do? They're trying to find the God particle, and then they claim they found the God particle, but it hasn't changed anything. If they found the God particle, that means they would become God. But none of them have become God, right? So there's just all this, false, let's call it research that's being done, and it's false research. It's like a bridge that leads to nowhere. They do a lot of research, they have a lot of data, but it doesn't really make that major breakthrough. What is that major breakthrough? Well, you solve the enigmatic problem of death. That's what they're trying to do. Every scientist ultimately is trying to find a way to overcome death, and that's right from the beginning. It was like that, and it's continuing like that now. And the scientists are you can't really be a scientist unless you can solve the problem of death. So there are a lot of scientists. They're doing a lot of experimentation, but their real goal is to stop death, and they have not been able to do that. They might be able to stop a toothache. They might be able to stop, I don't know, a heart attack and things like that, but they never have not been able to stop death. So therefore, they're not real scientists. A real scientist, someone who can stop death. Now, who can do that? Krishna himself. And but otherwise, you cannot violate the laws of material nature, who are established by Krishna. So there's certain limits to what a person can do, and they're universal limits established by Krishna. So there's certain things that they're trying to find out. They're experimenting. They're doing this, and they're never going to be able to do it. So, but they said, no, well, just give us a little bit more time. By, 2050, death will be a choice. If you don't want to die, you won't die. If you want to die, you can die. They talk all kinds of nonsense like that, but it's always in the future. It's like a post-dated check. Someone writes a post-dated check, that's payable in 2050 for $5 billion. But it's nonsense. That check is not what you couldn't sell that check even for 10 cents. No one's going to buy that check, right? Because it's a nonsense thing. You do a post-dated check for $5 billion. Would you accept that check? That means you would have to give them $5 million now.
Yeah.
You know. Yeah. Okay.
After death, we'll take another birth as a devotee or we'll go back to God. Some people also say that is that not a post-dated check?
Say that again.
Like after death, I mean, our philosophy says that if you are practicing Krishna conscious every day, and then you're chanting, you're eating prasadam, so at the time of death you remember Krishna, then you go back to Godhead. So is that also not a post-dated check?
A post-dated check. Well, let's understand that. Look that up on internet. A post-dated check is a check that you post-dated. That means it's payable sometime in the future. Now, is there an absolute guarantee that when that date arrives, you will get the money? No, there isn't. It's just you hope. That's it. Like, let's say you want to buy a car. So you go to the car company and you want to buy a brand new, Lexus. And you give them a post-dated check. Would you think they would accept it? No, they wouldn't accept. They would only accept the check that's dated, and the day that you're there, right? And then they won't give you the car right away. They'll put that check in the bank and make sure it's valid, that you actually have the money, and then they'll give you the car. But if you give a post-dated check, you say, "Oh yeah, well I'll pay for this Lexus, but you'll get your money in 20 years from now." They would just laugh. They laugh in your face. And we don't accept post-dated checks. So that is what the scientists are doing. They're giving everybody post-dated check. Yeah, by 2050, that will be optional. That's a post-dated check. And you don't know if, first of all, you don't know if even you'll be alive 2050. And the scientist that's saying that, he doesn't know if he's going to be alive 2050. And actually, it's a false promise because there's no guarantee that they will solve the riddle of death by 2050. Okay?
There are people that are believing, putting money,
Oh,
investors.
of course, yeah. The investors, you call them not
Billionaire.
investors, they're calling the
Evangelist.
no, they are
Venture capital.
no, the pesters. They're not investors, they're pesters. They're pestering people to give them money to do their research. That goes nowhere. A lot of research today doesn't really make any new finding. Just the fact that there's one research done after 10 years and $5 million. They came up with the conclusion that you do need a mother and father to raise a child properly. Wait a minute, that's junk research. You don't need. We knew that already, but they did the research to see if that's true, right? But it's been true since the beginning of time. So a lot of the research that's done is just junk. They don't really find anything new. Okay, they haven't found anything new since approximately 1920. They haven't really found anything significantly new. There's electromagnetism and there's gravity. Those are two forces that have been studied, and they've been able to make things based on the findings or their research. But besides that, those two things, gravity and electromagnetism, they haven't found anything else. Those are two forces that they have some knowledge of. So, your cell phone and all these things is based on electromagnetism, right? But besides that, they haven't found anything else. There are many more energies in nature, but they haven't discovered them yet.
The scientists have discovered 4 forces, Maharaj. So
Okay.
one is the gravitational force.
Yeah.
This force describes the attraction between all matter within the universe.
All right.
Then there is the electromagnetic force,
Okay. Those are
the
the two
force
big
between
ones.
charged particles.
Yeah.
And then there is the strong nuclear force that binds protons and neutrons together within the nucleus. And then weak nuclear force, the force responsible for radioactive decay and neutrino interactions. So these are the 4 forces.
The last two are the atomic bomb.
Mhm.
It's not really something beneficial for humanity. The first two, okay, yes, there's some validity there. The last two is nonsense. What do those last two lead to? Anything positive other than the atomic bomb?
Yeah, I mean, they were hoping to create power, so energy,
Right.
but I don't know how prevalent. I think certain countries maybe they have atomic power plants. Go ahead, Prabhu.
Well, the like in the field of like criminology and all, right? Like they can claim that they have found like how DNA evidence and how they're catching. So I mean, it's obviously the physical sciences, but then there's also the genetic, where some progress can be claimed, right? Like how they're catching. Um,
Yeah, but that doesn't. I mean, that doesn't probably require us to understand those 2 other forces, strong nuclear force and weak, right?
right. Yeah, I mean, yeah. Oh, and they probably just discovered what's already in nature, like the genetic fingerprint, right? So, yeah, it still comes from Krishna. So,
Well, look, the whole purpose of research is to overcome death. That's what they're experimenting. So you cannot be a real scientist unless you can find a way to stop death. So in one way, you might say that Jesus Christ was a scientist, right? So he was killed, and he came back from death. That's what they say. Now, it might be a hoax. I don't know, but he was a scientist. He was able to come back from the dead and walk around. And then some people didn't believe it. So there was one of his disciples, Thomas. They call him Doubting Thomas. So he doubted because after Jesus was crucified, and then his body was put in this cave, and they locked the cave with a big rock. And then all of a sudden, the rock was removed somehow, and Jesus was not there. And then they found him walking around for 40 days, right? And people were shocked, And one of his disciples called Thomas, and they call him Doubting Thomas. He said, "Look, I want to make sure you're not a fake." He said, "You were pierced by a spear in your ribs." He said, "Let me put my finger in your ribs to see, if you actually have a wound there." And Jesus said, "Okay," and he stuck his finger, and actually it went right into his body because that's where he was speared and killed, right? And then that proved that he was Jesus, that it was not, a false Jesus. He actually was killed, and then he came back from the dead. Why don't you look that up? The Doubting Thomas. This is a. So for 40 days, he walks around after he was killed. He's walking around and giving people, basically scaring people and giving some more, teachings. And then eventually he goes back to sit next to his father or God. So what does it say about doubting Thomas?
The Apostle Thomas,
Yeah,
one of the 12 disciples, who's best known for his initial skepticism about Jesus' resurrection. The term doubting Thomas has come to describe someone who refuses to believe something without direct evidence.
right. So what was the direct evidence? He wanted to put his finger into the wound, the where Jesus was plunged with a spear to prove that he was actually killed.
Yeah, unless I see the nail marks on his hands and put my finger where the nails were and put my hand into his side, I will not believe.
Yeah, and that's what actually happened. And then he believed that he was Jesus. But so what? Okay, now you believe he's Jesus, but what does it? What's the result of all that? Well, the result is that Christianity or belief in Jesus started from that point on. See, in other words, what's the proof that Jesus died? Well, he put his hand in the wound, and what was the second thing he did?
The hand nail marks on the hand.
Yeah, because they nailed him with the hands and the feet to a cross. So they wanted to make sure, this was actually Jesus who was nailed to the cross. And then one of the soldiers put a spear right through his ribs, and it was like the final blow to kill him.
Was that part of maybe the plan, that because there will be people who doubt, and
Yeah.
And Jesus wanted one of his disciples to act like.
Oh, well, I don't know that for sure, but obviously this is used as the proof that Jesus did die and was resurrected from the death. Right.
Yeah.
Now it might not be true. I don't know. Right. But
I'm just thinking, like, it's almost like when Arjuna wanted to see the universal form, and then he asked for it, and then he was given.
Yeah.
Because it's a way to prove the people that.
Right. That he's actually the Supreme Personality of Godhead. Yeah. Yeah. I mean, there are certain things that you have to believe in Christianity. The one is that Jesus was crucified on the cross and he died. And then he came back from the death. And you have to believe that if you're a Christian. If you say, I don't believe it, then you're not really a Christian anymore. Right. And then you have to believe that for 40 days he walked around, basically spooking people after his death. And then he went back to, so-called Godhead to be with his Father. So he resurrected, and people saw him. They actually saw him leaving the earth and going up to heaven. Right? They have to believe these things, right? So that's why a lot of people don't believe in Christianity, because they think that's all mythology. It's not factual. But Jesus did exist. That is factual proof that he did exist. So do you see that where he says, when he left he's killed, he's put into a cave, and then he exits the cave and walks around for 40 days And then after that, they see him actually go up into the sky, into heaven.
Maharaj, why did they put him in a cave? Because they generally bury the.
I don't know.
Oh.
That's what happened. They put his body in the cave and put this big stone on at the door of the cave, or in the hole of the cave. And then one day, after some couple days, the stone was taken away by somebody, and the cave was empty. And then they saw that Jesus was walking around, and he wasn't actually dead, or he was resurrected from the dead.
Why did he come back, Maharaj? Was there, according to the.
Well, why did he come back? Well, why did he die on the cross? Okay, so people die, right? But if they come back alive and walk around for 40 days and give more instructions and things like that, that means that this is Superman, not an ordinary person. So was the whole thing a hoax created by the Christians so that people would believe? Like, for example, you and I, we never saw Jesus, right? We just have to believe it. Right? But there are eyewitnesses that claim that he did these things.
Mhm.
But we're not. I mean, you can't be 100% sure. You just have to have faith. Just like someone tells us that Krishna lifted, Govardhan Hill and held it on his pinky. Well, we didn't see that. So you have to have faith that that actually happened.
The
This,
same thing, right, Maharaj? If you don't believe in that Jesus existed, then you can't even believe that Krishna existed.
Well, Jesus definitely existed. They have
But
proof
he
of
did
it.
those things, like
Yes.
certain things
Yeah.
as described. If you
Right.
can't believe that, you can't believe Bhagavad Gita.
Well, I mean, you can't deny that Jesus existed. Whether he did all those, what do you call, miracles, that's another question, right? You can't deny that Krishna existed. There's proof that he existed. Now the question is, do you believe all the miracles that he did? You know, uh, that's another question. You know, is there, okay? Let's ask the question: is there documented proof that he lifted Govardhan Hill? I don't know. It's a good thing to research. Is it documented, or is it just something you have to believe?
Scriptures only.
Well, the Bhagavatam says that, yeah. It's in a book, right? So, but there are a lot of different books. You have books that are fiction, and you have books that are nonfiction. So, is it fiction or nonfiction?
Bhagavatam says sometimes you know the cause by the effects.
Okay. The effect is that even today people are chanting the names of the Lord, and bowing down to the Lord, and and believing that everything that's in the Shastras are true. Well, actually, Bhagavad Gita is the oldest book in the history of the world. There's no book as old as the Bhagavad Gita. And Bhagavad Gita was not just spoken 5,000 years ago. That's the last time it was spoken. It was spoken about 140 million years ago by Krishna to Vivaswan, or the sun god. And then the sun god spoke it to other people. And then the last time it was spoken by Krishna was 5,000 years ago to Arjuna. Now, all these things are what? Substantiated. I mean, you and I did not see any of these things happen, right? So all we can do is just accept it because other people claim they saw it. Well, there's a lot of things like that. Like, for example, Okay, let me give you the opposite example. There is an atomic bomb because people saw it, right? No, I didn't see it. You didn't see it, but other people did see it, and they have pictures of it. So you can't deny that there is an atomic bomb. Right? Now, in the case of the existence of Krishna, there are a lot of people that said they saw Krishna, right? And there's books about it and so forth. And we are seeing Krishna in one sense because you have the deity of Krishna, and you have so many people worshiping Krishna. So you can't really deny it, but but you have to have faith that it's true. Yeah. So therefore, someone can say, "Well, I have faith that Donald Duck is God."
This is where the parampara and the praman, shabda praman come, right?
Yeah, yeah.
Because we're not just.
But it's not
Anything.
just false faith. You know, you have all these great personalities who are validating that the Lord actually existed and he did so many different things, and you know books about it and so forth. So, but still, you have to have faith. The position of a devotee is determined by how much faith they have. Like, for example, when Prabhupada and some of his disciples saw the moon landing in 19, what is it, 20, 1979, was it? Yeah. Anyway, they saw the movie, they saw the television. I also saw that, the moon landing was on television. But some of the devotees, well, then Prabhupada said, I don't believe they did this. And this devotees said, with Prabhupada, we just saw it on the television. He said, I don't believe he did it. Some of the devotees left. They thought Prabhupada was nonsense, right? Because they saw it on television. But that's not the proof. I mean, you see movies on television. Do you believe everything? All those movies, you know? You see people getting killed in the movie, right? There's a gunfight, you know, and somebody dies. Did the person really die? You know, there was one man. He was in a movie. He went to a movie, right? And he saw some somebody in the movie choking to death some woman, you know. And so he gets up off of his seat in the movie, you know, goes right up on the stage and looks directly at the the screen, you know, where you see a young lady being choked to death, you know, and he puts his head right next to the screen, because from a distance it looks like it's something real, but when he gets so close, he realizes there's just a screen there, and there's black and white dots. That's it. There's no lady being choked to death. But from a distance, it looks so real, you know. And so he wanted to go right up to the movie screen and see, you know, what's going on exactly. He said, "Is there actually a woman being choked?" So it's very easy to create, uh, visual things that are not true. You know, it's just based on black and white and shades. And you can so now you can say, well, wait a minute, what are you talking about? You know, of course, it could be all acting or it could be real. So in this way, there are a lot of things that you can be cheated by in life. You can say, well, I saw it. You know, I saw Houdini cut this lady in half. He put her in a box, and her feet were here, and her head was there. Then he cut the box in half, and he separated the two halves. And then there was a curtain. And then when they opened the curtain, the lady was jumping up and down, going, Haribol, Haribol. And Houdini was there too. So I saw it with my own eyes that that lady was cut in half. Yeah, it looked like she was cut in half because what was Houdini? He was a what you would call a
Magician.
huh?
Magician, illusionist.
He's an illusionist. He was an illusionist. Right. So there are weapons of mass destruction that in Iraq and what was his name? Saddam Hussein has weapons of mass destruction, and based on that statement, America went to war. It's the first time that America went on a preemptive war where they started it. Up until that point, America never started a war. But based on false information, they went and bombed Iraq and killed so many people. And the whole thing was a hoax. There was no weapons of mass destruction in Iraq. And they created this whole narrative that we have to go to war. And so you see, it's very easy to trick people. People are being tricked all the time by false narratives. And it can take years to realize that this was false. Something is false. So we have to, that's why there's parampara. We have to accept parampara. That way we won't make any mistakes. Is it parampara that Saddam Hussein had weapons of vast destruction? No, it was the speculation of some people, but actually it was just a false narrative that was made by the United States so they could justify bombing Iraq and killing Saddam Hussein. They created the hoax. So we have to be very careful, and we have to decide who we believe and who we should not believe. Just like you can go to one doctor and he says, "Oh, you got cancer." Then you go to another doctor just to get a second opinion. He says, "You don't have cancer." So now the question is, who do you believe? Yeah. Okay, Haribol. Oh, voice of Prabhupada. Haribol. You should believe Prabhupada. Yeah. You should believe everything Prabhupada says. Then you won't make any mistakes.
The
Hare
main thing you
Krishna.
said in the end, Maharaj, so there's all the organic gurus, so many of them individually, like trying to teach, and you can be tricked, right? Because you don't know what is true. That is why you need to have that parampara where the truth is being passed. There's multiple validations,
Yeah.
and there has to be so much power to it to be passed on for generations like that way, where you're still reciting the whole year. Instead of just believing like one person or like just one group that just came up all of a sudden.
Well, I mean, you could say also that Mickey Mouse, has been around for a long time, and some kids believe in Mickey Mouse. In fact, parents take them to Disneyland, and there's Mickey Mouse walking around, right? At Disneyland, of course, there's a man with a Mickey Mouse suit costume, yeah. So, but for a kid, they believe, well, I saw Mickey Mouse at Disneyland, so he exists. He's not just a cartoon. So it's just like there are weapons of mass destruction in Iraq. Some things are completely false, but they look real because some so-called not spiritual, but so-called responsible people are saying it's real. Just like you go to one doctor and it says you got cancer. You go to another doctor and it says you don't have cancer. So then you get confused. You say, why did the first doctor say I did have cancer? Well, because he wanted to buy a fur coat for his wife. That's why he said that. Sometimes it's like that.
Yeah, Maharaj.
Where so many times even the doctor will get caught, but still they will somehow
Yeah.
escape from it and they will continue their surgery.
Yeah. Well, look, you don't make money by saying take 2 aspirins, you'll be all right. You make money by doing an operation. Haribo. Thank you very much. So, Prabhupada.